December 12, 1943, RAF Thurleigh Airfield, Bedfordshire, England. The fog rolled low that morning, thick as milk, heavy with the smell of oil and frost. It clung to the B-17s like a shroud, muting their silver skins to ghostly gray. Men moved like shadows between the hulking bombers, their breath steaming, their boots crunching over frozen gravel. Somewhere in the distance, a generator coughed to life, its sputter swallowed by the steady drone of idling Wright cyclone engines. Sergeant Joe Arman rubbed his gloved hands together and blew into them. His fingertips were numb from the cold, but there was no time for warmth. The 306th Bombardment Group was scheduled for another daylight raid over Germany and one of their aircraft. The Lady Luck wasn't going anywhere. Its supercharger, the mechanical heart that forced oxygen into the engines at altitude, had seized overnight. Without it, the bomber couldn't climb above 10,000 feet, far too low to survive the flak belts and German fighters waiting over the Ruhr. The supply officer had shaken his head. No spares, no replacements. "Grounded," the squadron engineer said flatly. "She's done." But Arman didn't hear that word. Done. To him, it meant leaving 9 men behind. It meant watching another crew climb aboard a different B-17, their faces tight with fear, and maybe not come back. He crouched beneath the wing, running his hands along the cold metal cowling. The supercharger casing was cracked, a long, jagged fracture like a lightning scar across its housing. He knew it wasn't repairable under normal field conditions. The factory manual said it required specialized machining, precise tolerances, and alignment gauges they didn't have anywhere within 100 miles. But Arman wasn't thinking about manuals. He thought about the mission brief, Leipzig, ball-bearing plants, heavy resistance expected. He thought about the empty bunks that never got filled again. And then he made a decision that would turn him from just a mechanic into a legend. He shouted to his assistant, "Corporal Reeves, get me the acetylene torch and the scrap bin. I've got an idea." Inside the hangar, the air was thick with exhaust and sweat despite the winter cold. The men worked under flickering lamps, their faces smeared with oil, their movements fast but deliberate. The clock ticked toward dawn. Arman had stripped the failed supercharger from the engine, a complicated, heavy beast of gears, vanes, and impellers. The damage was worse than he'd hoped. The turbine housing had split clean through, a victim of stress and cold. He needed a new shell. But all they had was junk, discarded parts from wrecked B-17s stacked behind the hangar. Twisted remnants of machines that hadn't made it back from Schweinfurt, Bremen, or Wilhelmshaven. He picked through them with a flashlight, the beam cutting across piles of bent propellers and burned-out engines. And then he saw it, a scorched supercharger unit from a crash-landed bomber. The casing was warped, half melted, but maybe, just maybe, he hauled it back with Reeves, grunting under the weight. "What are we doing?" Sarge Reeves asked. "Making a new one," Arman muttered, eyes never leaving the damaged metal. "From 2 broken hearts." For the next 6 hours, sparks lit the hangar like artillery flashes. The torch hissed. Arman cut, ground, and welded with surgical precision a craftsman possessed. He filed the edges with a mechanic's intuition, feeling the heat through his gloves, judging each joint by sound and smell. At one point, the base engineer walked in and froze. "You're going to blow yourself up," he warned. Arman didn't look up. "If it works, we fly tomorrow. If not, at least I tried." By mid-afternoon, the contraption looked like something Frankenstein might have built: mismatched alloys, scavenged seals, a rough scar running down the middle where the two housings met. But when they mounted it back on the Lady Luck's engine and fired her up, the impossible happened. The right cyclone sputtered once, then roared to life. The supercharger whined unevenly at first, then smooth. Arman and Reeves stood there, eyes wide, their faces lit orange by the exhaust flame. The sound was unmistakable. A working engine, climbing through its RPMs as if nothing had ever been wrong. Within an hour, the 306th's commanding officer, Colonel Claude Putnam, was standing beside Arman on the tarmac. He didn't say much, just looked at the bomber, then at the mechanic who refused to quit. "Sergeant," he said finally, "you just kept a squadron alive." The next morning, the Lady Luck took off with the others, joining the thunderous formation over the channel. December 13th, 1943. Above the North Sea, 22,000 feet. The sky was a sheet of frozen steel, streaked with contrails like white veins across the heavens. 60 bombers from the 306th Bomb Group droned eastward in perfect formation, their wings flexing under the strain of the cold air. Below them, the clouds rolled like smoke over the gray water, blotting out everything but the rising sun and the faint memory of England's coastline. Inside, the Lady Luck. The crew braced against the vibration of their engines, all four roaring, all four alive. The rebuilt supercharger was holding. Sergeant Joe Arman's handiwork sang beneath their feet, a metallic heartbeat keeping them aloft. Pilot Lieutenant Frank Malloy glanced at his co-pilot and gave a tight grin. "Tell Joe he's a magician," he muttered into the intercom. "We owe him our asses." The intercom crackled back from the ground crew frequency at Thurley. Faint but audible. "Copy that, sir." "He's listening on the hangar radio. Says to keep it under the red line. She's got a temper." The crew laughed, even as the bomb bay doors rattled with icy wind. Then, over the North Sea, the formation tightened. Leipzig was ahead. At 11:17 hours, the German radar operators detected them. Sirens began to wail over the city. Flak towers powered up their 88 mm guns. The first black puffs appeared in the air, distant, then closer, blossoming like dark flowers amid the sunlight. "Flak! 12 o'clock," shouted the bombardier. The formation began to weave. Slight changes in altitude, each B-17 trusting the others like partners in a deadly dance. The first burst hit the bloody bell. 2 planes over. A fragment tore through her right wing, igniting fuel. She rolled once, trailing fire, then vanished into the cloud layer below. No parachutes, no time. Inside the Lady Luck. Nobody spoke. Malloy kept his hands firm on the controls, glancing at the manifold pressure stable. The supercharger whine was steady. sharp as a knife's edge. The ship held formation through the flak curtain. When they reached the initial point, the Norden bomb site took over. "Bombs away," the bombardier called. The aircraft lurched as 5,000 pounds of ordnance dropped toward the factories below. Seconds later, German fighters dove in Messerschmitt Bf 109S and Focke-Wulf 190S, screaming down through the sunlight. Tracers tore the air. The radio crackled with shouts and static. Malloy shouted, "Gunners, eyes sharp. Keep them off the tail gunner." Sergeant Dunn opened up with twin .50 calibers, his hands frozen to the grips. A 190 streaked past, smoke pouring from its engine, then disintegrated in midair. The formation bent toward home. 2 engines on the Lucky Penny were out. The old Crow had a hole the size of a man in her fuselage. But the Lady Luck, the bomber that was supposed to stay grounded, climbed higher, her patched-up heart beating harder than ever. By the time they crossed the coast of Holland, the radio reports began to count losses. 10 aircraft down, 5 missing. But without Arman's miracle, it would have been 11, maybe 12. At Thurley, the cold night returned. The runway lights blinked through mist as the surviving bombers limped home, one by one, their wheels touching down with groans of protest. Ground crews rushed forward, counting engines, counting faces. When the Lady Luck appeared out of the fog, the hangar erupted. Men pointed and shouted. Her landing lights blinked once, twice the prearranged signal. Mission accomplished. Arman was standing by the dispersal hut, his coveralls still stained from the night before. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the entire day pacing the field, listening to radio chatter, waiting for the sound of his plane's engines. When she finally rolled to a stop, Malloy climbed down first, still wearing his oxygen mask around his neck. He didn't say anything at first, just grabbed Arman's hand and held it. Then he laughed, raw and shaky. "Your machine kept us alive, Joe." That damn thing purred like a kitten the whole way back. The crew gathered around, smacking the mechanic on the back, laughing in disbelief. Someone produced a dented flask of gin. Someone else lit a cigarette with trembling hands. Later that night, in the officers' mess, Colonel Putnam raised a glass. "Gentlemen," he said, "today we bombed Leipzig. We brought most of our boys home. And that's because one man refused to listen when he was told something couldn't be done." He turned toward the corner of the room, where Arman sat awkwardly among officers, a wrench still sticking from his pocket. "Sergeant Joseph Arman, you gave the 306th Bomb Group its heart back." The men stood, glasses raised, the noise of their cheer echoing through the wooden walls. In the following weeks, the story of the miracle on the field spread across air bases from Thurley to Thorpe Abbotts. Mechanics talked about it like scripture, how one man with a torch and faith in his craft kept a bomber squadron alive. Arman didn't see himself as a hero. He kept fixing engines, same as before, same stained gloves, same quiet nights under the wings of tired planes. But sometimes, when he heard the distant rumble of engines climbing into the night sky, he'd stop and listen and smile faintly, knowing that maybe, just maybe, one of those heartbeats was his.